Ladies and gentlemen, now we get to turn to the main event, the conferral of the Washington Institute's Scholar-Statesman Awards. Earlier this evening, on our screen and in your program, you saw the caliber of leader who served as recipients of this award in years past. This year, for the first time, we travel to the Middle East to find our honorees. And there we find two men, neither of whom has led a government or a foreign ministry, neither of whom is a diplomat by training or a negotiator of treaties and accords, but both of whom are men who, through force of experience, ideas, and will, have moved millions in their countries, in their region, and around the world. On a personal level, it is truly for me a great privilege to be part of a program that honors these two men. I have known both for decades. I first met Natan Sharansky when Hirsch Goodman introduced us at a cafe in Jerusalem, and I have been an admirer ever since. By then, of course, he had already been through the horrors of the Gulag and was only just starting out on a second stage of terror, Israeli politics. I first met Saadettin Ibrahim in Cairo many years earlier and had the privilege of hosting him in Washington as our Institute's first Arab visiting scholar soon after I became director in 1993. He had not yet taken on the Goliath of the Egyptian regime, but he had already showed his bravery by authoring for us a study on the vindication of Anwar Sadat in the Arab world. Later, of course, he dared to speak truth to power and languished for that in a Cairo jail. For neither of these men is the job finished. Indeed, the events of the Middle East just this week underscore how much longer is the road to a true democratic peace. But imbued with the spirit of these men, one in the thick of the contest of current events as chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel, and the other in the thick of the contest of current events back in Cairo, where he teaches young people still at the American University of Cairo, I am confident we will reach the goal. So tonight it is wonderful to host an event that recognizes the hope that each of them separately and both together have inspired in millions of women and men, Jews and Muslims, Arabs and Israelis, peoples of all faith. I will let this video tell the story even better. For the last 4 years, the Washington Institute has honored scholar-statesmen who have demonstrated extraordinary vision and courage throughout their careers. Tonight, we continue that tradition. Today, the Middle East is poised for change. From Morocco to Yemen, the people of the region clamor for democracy, freedom, and the chance for a new life. Our honorees are symbols of that yearning. Throughout their lives, Natan Sharansky and Saadettin Ibrahim have led the charge for freedom. They share a story of struggle against oppression, a story of great personal sacrifice, of vindication, and of work still to be done. They fought not only for their own rights, but for the rights of all peoples. They are the founders of movements, reluctant icons, the inspiration for others who struggled with them and after them, and they were, throughout, willing to brave the consequences.
If you believe in something, if you're a true believer, then you have to be prepared to take some risks.
I was haunted, I was arrested sometimes, persecuted in different forms.
For their courage, both felt the crushing weight of tyranny, the betrayal of justice systems that condemned them for fabricated crimes, and dispatch them to the torment of prison.
Let's make an example of him, and let's drive home to all other academics and journalists and thinkers in Egypt that there is a price that would be paid if you run afoul of the will of the Mubarak government.
Undaunted, and with the steadfast and formidable efforts of their families, they brought international pressure to bear on their oppressors, and they eventually prevailed in securing their freedom and the freedom of millions who supported their quest for change.
I think of the sight of Nathan Sharansky, still in the dominion of his KGB captors, zigzagging his way across the tarmac after they ordered him to walk a straight line.
Anatoly Sharansky has fought heroically and showed that you can arrest a body, you cannot put in prison a spirit.
They emerged from prison stronger, more determined opponents of autocracy, more resolute believers in the power of freedom to change lives and build peace. Together they have raised their voices, seeing in their movements a convergence across the decades and across differences of culture and politics.
And if we add our fight to your fight, then I am assured that we must prevail, and we will prevail.
These men have given much, and they remind us of the work still to be done, and of our common role in the pursuit of freedom for all people, in the as yet unfulfilled mission to bring peace within nations and between nations.
We should think about Saad in his prison cell, and remember that it's our obligation every day that we go forth, whatever our job, wherever we live, whatever we believe, to make sure that we hold dear the rule of law here and around the world.
Today, as our hopes for peace and democracy and a culture of tolerance in the Middle East remain clouded by violence and repression, we look to the examples of these two courageous men. They experienced the darkest of days, but never lost faith in the power to change lives and open the doors to freedom. Today, they continue to believe that democracy and peace will eventually prevail in the Middle East. They are an inspiration. We are honored to pay tribute to their work this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Saadettin Ibrahim and the Honorable Natan Sharansky. And to confer their medals, I call up our co-chairs, Zach Schreiber, Tony Beyer, along with Howard Berkowitz and Marty Gross.
To Natan Sharansky, scholar and statesman. Few human rights activists can claim to be a household name, known around the world to ordinary citizens and global leaders alike. But for more than a generation, you have symbolized mankind's struggle for liberty. Thanks to you and your fellow strugglers for freedom, you not only liberated Soviet Jews, but you took your message of hope and resilience to your new home in Israel and to people around the Middle East and throughout the world. Your victories have inspired people around the world to dream lofty dreams, to fight for human rights, and to believe that justice can prevail. For demonstrating that courage and faith are stronger than iron and steel, it is my pleasure to present you with the Washington Institute Scholar-Statesman Award. May you continue to inspire us and to do important work for many years to come. Thank you.
To Saadettin Ibrahim, scholar and statesman, your still small voice spoke up and spoke out against injustice and tyranny. You paid a terrible price for speaking truth to power, yet you persisted, undaunted in your campaign for tolerance, peace, and freedom. For 20 years, you have been associated with the Washington Institute, a badge we wear proudly. A reluctant hero and visionary of great courage, if the uncertainty we see unfolding in the streets of Cairo and elsewhere in the Middle East blossoms into the hoped-for democratic peace, history will see you as its prophet. For demonstrating that ideas are more powerful than power, it is with great pleasure that I now present you with the Washington Institute's Scholar-Statesman Award. May your work quickly come to fruition, and may all the people of the Middle East soon enjoy lives of peace and freedom.
Friends that I've known for so many years, this is really such a great pleasure for me. Let me open by asking you about something from your past before we go into something about the present and the future. You, Natan, were in a Soviet jail. You, Saad, were in an Arab jail, Egyptian jail. So tell me about what it takes to survive an experience like this. And what do you think might be a common experience that each of you had in trying to survive against this tyranny? Saad?
Hard to figure out. In the cold cell I was in Tura prison, I reflected on what had made me withstand all the arduous hardships of dealing and confronting not just the last regime, but I was a dissident from the days of Nasser. I was put under sequestration in the days of Nasser. I was shunned and yelled at by President Sadat. And then ultimately I was put in prison by President Hosni Mubarak. So reflecting, what made me do all of that? It is a feeling of the unbearable condition of injustice that I experienced it as a child. And the teaching and the nurturing of my own mother, who helped me to stand up and to fight for justice. And that is really the thing that kept me over the years. It was that early nurturing by a mother, a peasant mother in the Delta of Egypt. And that is something that kept me, even in prison, some 60 years later, in Tora prison, I was able to. I saw Peter Bergen earlier in the evening. And I remember an encounter, very interesting encounter, in the Tora prison. When President Bush started bombing Al-Qaeda enclaves in Afghanistan and threatening to pursue the Al-Qaeda everywhere. And many of the prisoners in Tora were veterans of Afghanistan. And because America spoke on my behalf, those veterans of Afghanistan who felt that they may be bombed by America, all requested to come to my cell block, thinking that if they are in my cell block, they would be safe. I told Peter Bergen this episode earlier.
Natan, was it the memory of your mother that kept you going?
Well, prison, there are two important things. On one hand, you must take everything very seriously. You must really feel that you are in the middle of historical 1,000-year struggle, and that every word of yours will have tremendous influence on 1,000 years ahead. That you really must feel this big responsibility and to remind yourself again and again that all your people, those who were before and those who will be after, and of course your family and your friends, they are all in this struggle. And everything depends on you, on one hand. On the other hand, you must take nothing seriously. You must be able to laugh at all these absurdities. You must understand that you must make laugh of your prison guards, of everybody. That helps you all the time to take all this in real proportion. And why I'm telling you? Because when we met and had a very long conversation with Saad in Prague, the conference which we organized for democratic dissidents, and I'm sure that he didn't read my book, but when I was asking him again and again about his imprisonment, his interrogations, and when he was telling me, as if he read my book, and then he's trying to adjust his experience to mine, because he was joking about these interrogations. He was telling me what they asked him and how he was asking this with Lord. And at the same time, he was telling how he understood this moral difference between that high world in which we live and that world in which they live, and how it is important to stick to the principles. So I really was amazed to feel that these two different realities, the reality of KGB and the reality of then modern Egypt of Mubarak, but if you want to win in this struggle against against these forces of darkness, you have to stick to these same principles. On one hand, to see it as a very important and principled struggle. On the other hand, to be able to laugh at all this.
All right, friends, let's move forward. It is 12 months since Mohamed Bouazizi lit himself on fire in Tunisia. And the world in the Middle East has never been the same. It has gone through, like a roller coaster, ups and downs, perhaps ups again. So let me open this part of our conversation by getting your assessment. 1 year after the start of this great upheaval, where are we? Is this moving in the right direction? Is this more democracy? Is freedom come to the Middle East? Or, as some have suggested, all we've got is chaos and the rule of the mob. Or perhaps, is it both at the same time? Saad, let me start with you.
Well, it is both. And as Churchill once said, to make an omelette, you have to break a lot of eggs. And that's basically what we are witnessing in every revolution. There will be a lot of ups and downs. There will be victories and defeats, advances and setbacks. I feel that the biggest challenge to all of us in the Middle East and to all freedom fighters, lovers around the world, is to guard against the revolution, the democratic revolutions in the Middle East being hijacked. Hijacked by counter-revolutionaries, hijacked by the military, hijacked by religious fanatics. And that is a challenge for all of us. And I've written recently reminding people in my region, in my country, of two great revolutions that were hijacked. The Russian Revolution, we have Nathan with us, that between February and October of 1970, small group of cohesive, iron disciplined communists were a small faction in February, became the dominant faction in October. A matter of 8 months. They were able to hijack the Russian Revolution. Same thing happened with the Iranian Revolution, some 60 years later, when Mujahidi Khalq, the young people, like the Tahrir youngsters in Egypt, were the ones who withstood the brunt of the oppression of the Shah, and were able to stage a glorious revolution. Yet came the Ayatollah from Paris and took over, hijacked the Iranian Revolution, and we know the rest. Many of us here in the audience were old enough to remember what happened back in 1979. So that is the danger, that our revolution in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, in Yemen, and now an ongoing revolution in Syria. These are revolutions that were staged by young, eager Democrats, and yet there is danger that they may be hijacked by more disciplined, cohesive, iron-led Islamists in our region. And, you know, there are, of course, we're not here to strategize, but it's something that I'm alerting this audience, assuming that they all have a deep interest and a lasting commitment to seeing a stable and progressive and peaceful Middle East. So for all of you, we are not going to fight that alone. We need your spirit, your goodwill, your help, the government that you can influence to help us to guard against the hijacking of the democratic revolutions in the Middle East.
Natan, you have spoken eloquently about the freedom agenda and the urgency of democracy in the Middle East, but we have just seen election results from Morocco, Tunisia, and especially Egypt. And Islamic parties have done fabulously well. And the Facebook generation, the young men and women of Tahrir Square, did terribly. Is this the future of democracy in this part of the world?
Well, I would say that there are so many people who didn't believe that there ever will be any revolution from the bottom, that people in the Middle East at some moment will challenge regimes, not through the coup, but through the street demonstrations. And then when it happened, they said, oh, we could think about it. Now there is real democracy. And then a few months after this, when there is this result of elections, they said, oh, we knew that it's not democracy. It's awful what happened. It all goes in the wrong direction. If only Obama didn't betray Mubarak, we still could have much better situation. That's what they hear. One of our journalists wrote a few days ago, you see these elections? Now it's clear that the Egyptian revolution is not French revolution. I say, I hope it's not French. People don't remember what was French Revolution. French Revolution with these great slogans. Next day, what started that every other leader was killed by opposition or sent to guillotine and declared to be the enemy of the people. And this red terror started not in Bolshevik Revolution, it started in the French Revolution. And then there was 10 years of corruption of different governments. And then there came Napoleon, and then came Louis XVIII. And 2 generations after the French Revolution, finally there started the process of building civil society. Does it mean that all these 2 generations it was in vain? It would be better if Louis XVI will stay at power? Of course not. There is a big distance from going out of fair society, revolting against fair society, crossing this line between double think and dissent, and building that civil society where not only you feel that you don't live in fear, but where your enemy also doesn't have to live in fear. It's a big change in the society, which has to happen. Now, what really happened, and by the way, until this day, it's not understood and not appreciated really, what happened in Egypt and in the other countries. For the people felt, not that felt that they want to live in the democracy of Jefferson and Washington. They felt that they live under the fear, constant fear, that they can be punished for their views. And at some moment, it becomes unbearable. And at some moment, they feel that the regime is weak, and now they can try to cross this line. That's exactly how it's happening in every other society, in Eastern Europe, in Latin America, and today in the Arab Street. So the people, and by the way, like a few days after Mubarak fell, I meet one of our responsible for our intelligence in Israel. And I say, you understand that now it will move to Syria? He said, absolutely not. It will not move to Syria. I said, why? And he explained me what's happening in the army, what happens between Sunni and Shia, what happens between Allah and Alawi, what happens with the economy, and that's why Syria is different. I said, but do you know that in Syria today, people are speaking in the streets, jokes, which 3-4 years ago they were afraid to say. And that's exactly what happened now in Egypt. Jokes about Mubarak, which were told publicly in the last year, it's exactly jokes for which Saad went to prison. He said that Mubarak wants to stay at power forever and went to prison. Now they were speaking freely. So that is exactly conditions when people are not afraid anymore. And he said, well, it's okay, but it doesn't belong to the analysis of the situation. So we have to understand what happened. It's not something that the West missed or the West could influence differently. People decided they don't want to continue living under fear anymore. So it was inevitable. Now, not only it was inevitable, we have to understand that the longer the situation would continue with Mubarak, the worse for us. Again, I quote Saad in Prague when we invited not only democratic dissidents but also President Bush. And he spoke to each of these dissidents. And Saad thanked President Bush for help to release, but also challenged him, why do you support Mubarak? He's such a corrupt dictator. Remember, you asked President Bush. President Bush gave the answer which every leader of the free world will give. And I afraid him today will give. He said, we have no choice, because if it will not be Mubarak, it will be Muslim Brothers. And we prefer Mubarak. And then again, Saad said exactly what we all, democratic dissidents, felt. If the only choice which you will leave to these people is Mubarak or Muslim Brothers, and then it will be Muslim Brothers. Remember, I said, we had, by the way, the same experience in Palestine. If the only choice which we left to Palestinians was or Arafat or Hamas, and then it was Hamas. So, first, it was inevitable. Second, the longer this regime continued, the bigger will be victory of Muslim Brothers on the election. If 10 years ago Mubarak would be removed, maybe Muslim Brothers would have only 10%. So that is in them. Now, of course, now it is very important whether the democratic forces will be capable and able to start building civil society. And that depends a lot, again, on the free will. Because whoever will be leading to the age, they have to understand that they depend now on their capabilities to deliver goods to their people. And here the role of the free will is absolutely critical.
But let me ask this specific question. So, if America wants Egypt to be the sort of democracy both of you want it to become, and if we don't want it to be hijacked by the Islamists, as you just warned, then who do we help? And how do we do it? We just saw the Facebook generation get 16% of the vote.
My answer?
That's a question to you.
Help the process, be consistently principled.
Consistently principled? We're talking about Washington here.
I'm hoping that even Washington could be principled. Is that too much to hope for?
Go ahead.
If you support principles and process, I think even if the Islamists win the next round, that they will not win the round after. I am of the conviction that democracy is self-correcting. This is lessons of history. And I would rather live with whatever outcome, so long as the process is free, fair, and sound, and transparent. The people who were able to topple a regime, the young people of Egypt, well, Tahrir Square has become like a fourth branch of government, authority. We used to talk about the three branches of power. Tahrir, popular legitimacy, is there as a political controller of the evolution of the process. And therefore I have a lot of faith that I had faith in our people in the darkest of hours, that nobody had any hope. I had hope. And I continue to do so. And I believe that the young people who staged the revolution and who toppled an autocratic regime like that of Mubarak, like that of Ben Ali, like that of Ali Allah Saleh of Yemen, and now that they are trying to do the same in Syria, these people will be the best guardian of their own revolution, of their own universal yearning for freedom and democracy. I have no doubt that this will be the case.
Saad, let me ask you about Israel's interests. There are two schools of thought. Israel has to be wary of what's going on around, or Israel has to take steps to try to shape what's going on around. Which school do you belong to, and if the latter, what should Israel do?
Well, first of all, I'm a little bit afraid of the words, should Israel try to shape the situation in the Middle East, or should America try? Yes, of course, Israel and America should try to influence, but only, as I said, sticking to the principles, not, God forbid, trying now to start giving advices what you guys have to do, whatever. If not only Israel, all the free world had kind of silent agreement with the Arab world for 100 years, beginning from British policy of Lawrence Arabian. What was the policy? That we, your dictators, will deliver stability and we will support these dictators. And that was all through this 100 years. Now, this agreement is broken. It's not existing. And it's broken not because of the leaders of the free world decided to stop it. People in the street don't want to continue. Now there are, in fact, two options. One, which I'm afraid of, that we, the free world, and Israel, will start looking for the influence. Who of these people will agree to take into account our interest more? And there will be some kind of moderation of non-democratic forces who feel that that's how they can stay at power. And then we'll have a new set of dictators, which will be with some conditions supported by the free world, and then the history will repeat itself. The other option is to stick to the principle. The West and Israel have no sense. We don't have an opportunity to influence directly, but we have a big opportunity to influence simply by saying that all our cooperation, all our assistance, all our recognition of your legitimacy, everything will be connected to the pace of development of civil society. The deeper is civil society reforms, the deeper is our cooperation. For Israel, what it means for Israel? Israel can benefit a lot if it will stop being the only democracy in the Middle East. A lot. How it can happen? I continue saying that all our so-called peace process was not a peace process because it was connected to supporting dictatorships, undermining process of democracy. Palestinians could be 20 years ago the first democratic entity in the Middle East because they were very close to the democratic way of life in the Middle East, because they had educated diaspora, because they had businessmen who were part of came Oslo Agreement, which said that that Arafat will be dictator, and we will make sure that he will be strong dictator in order he can deliver us peace. And then buried it. Then there was hope after Arafat died. By chance, that very day, I was meeting with President Bush, because he invited me to discuss the case of democracy. He asks me, is Abu Mazen good guy or bad guy? And I told him, look, I can prove you that he's a good guy. I can prove you that he's a bad guy. And I have enough proofs of this. It doesn't matter. The question is now whether American policy will stick to the principles of civil society or not. And what was done then? That was demand to have the elections as soon as possible, and really America twisted our hand to make sure that Hamas, against Oslo agreements, will participate in these elections. And exactly like was predicted, that when the only choice is Arafat and Hamas, they chose Hamas. Now we have third opportunity. And third opportunity is not because of us, but because there is big desire to have, all over the Middle East, to have governments which depend on their people. This desire also will be translated among Palestinians. So that is a classical case how peace can be built from bottom up. Not through imposing that in the next 2 months we must sign peace. There are no conditions, there is nobody to sign peace in the next 2 months. But in the next 2 months there will be more reforms building it from bottom up, and more desire to do it, and more cooperation in the region, and the fourth months of the year. So yes, I think we can influence on the situation, but only sticking to the principles and not trying to impose it.
Let me close by asking Saad one last important question. Saad, we have just celebrated recently the 30th anniversary of Egypt-Israel peace. Seeing everything that is happening in the Middle East today, will there be another 30 years of peace between Israel and Egypt? Will we celebrate this on the 60th anniversary?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is that I wish we'll celebrate it not only between Egypt and Israel, but for the entire Middle East. Two questions I asked my wife on that first day of the revolution. I was in New Jersey at Drew University. And she was in Tahrir Square from the first hour of the revolution. She happened to be there. The two questions were, what is the gender mix-up of the crowd? Are there boys and girls? And the answer was yes. Second question was, is there the usual bashing of Israel and of America, which had been a pastime for every demonstration for at least first 2 weeks? No. There was no bashing of Israel. There was no mention of America in the crowd. And that, to me, was a healthy sign. Because if the young people who were staging a revolution are not obsessed with anti-Americanism and anti-Israeli sentiment, then we are at least to a good beginning. And I was hopeful, of course, that the Israelis would take advantage of that early neutrality and make some progressive moves toward the Palestinians to at least take the poisonous element out of the discourse in the Middle East, which for nearly 60 or 70 years has been a distraction from the real issues that concern the average man and woman in the region. Autocratic dictators, the autocratic rulers have always abused. There is, of course, a legitimate dispute over Palestine between the Jewish people and the Palestinians. But the abuse by the Arab regimes who had not liberated 1 inch of the so-called lost Palestine, have not in 70 years. And yet, they have used that issue day and night to distract their people, to divert their attention from the abuses of the ruling elites in the Middle East. So I was very keen to know how salient that issue is in Tahrir Square in the early days, and it actually remained a marginal issue for nearly a month. It was, I think, in the 6th week after the revolution that some Naserites thought to use that issue again when they staged the march to the Israeli embassy. That was, again, the last hurrah of that old style of politics. And it is up to progressive Israelis to really make some very bold moves in the tradition of the late Prince Sadat. They are strong. They have no imminent fear of being thrown into the sea, as the old saying used to. And therefore, from a position of strength, they should make some very courageous and humane move toward the Palestinians. I think if they do that, then we will be to a truly, truly genuine and promising resumption of the march that many of us march for peace and democracy. Because these are two sides of the same coin. I am a firm believer that peace and democracy are integral in the Middle East. And I'm hopeful that our Israeli friends, colleagues, will help the small constituency on the Arab side to expand, to become a major constituency. by making some bold moves toward the Palestinians.
Friends, please join me in thanking and congratulating these two champions of human rights.